Oh America, land of supposed straightforwardness, goodbye. A night after returning to China, staring at the ceiling from my mattress, I whispered this to myself. I had longed to come back, yet the feeling deep in my heart wasn't liberation, but a hollow, echoing void. I was born and raised in provincial China and worked for a local Chinese company. One day I was abruptly ordered to transfer to a branch in the United States. Amidst the joy of recognition and the anxiety of the unknown, I was eager to challenge myself in a new environment. So, I headed to America. But reality was harsher than I imagined. In the American workplace, the most important thing was a pervasive, almost theatrical politeness. 1. It seemed to slow everything down. When I stated my opinion directly in a meeting, the room fell silent. No one responded. Later, my boss gently advised me to consider people's feelings and be more diplomatic in my communication. 2. Even at company happy hours, it was difficult to relax. The conversations were all small talk, maintaining a friendly distance that felt superficial. 3. If you declined an invitation, you were seen as not being a team player, but even if you went, it was never truly relaxing. Living like that day after day, I gradually suppressed my true self. Daily life was also filled with invisible social rules. Procedures at the bank or the DMV were complicated. A small mistake on a form meant starting all over. At the supermarket, cutting in line even slightly would earn you disapproving glances. I thought I was just doing what was most efficient, but I learned firsthand that correctness in American society had a different form, one wrapped in layers of courtesy. It was during this time that I received the notice from my company to transfer back to headquarters in China. In that moment, I felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Finally, I can go back, I thought with all my heart. Back to a place free from this suffocating need to be constantly pleasant, a place where I could live freely as myself. But at that time, I didn't know where true freedom really was, and I never imagined that my journey to find a lost answer was about to begin. When the plane landed in China, I took a deep breath. The familiar, humid air was comforting. I'm finally back. After a life of navigating the careful courtesies of America, I had returned to a place of freedom. Or so I thought. That feeling of comfort vanished quickly. At baggage claim, my suitcase was nowhere to be seen. I approached an employee. My bag hasn't come out yet. Just wait, he grunted, without even looking up from his phone. It was then I realized that the polite service and ready smiles I'd received at the airport in the US had, without my knowing, become my standard. This kind of service in China used to be normal, but now it felt shockingly cold. It was the same at customs. The officer didn't make eye contact, mechanically processing my documents while uttering only the most necessary words. When I asked a question, he just waved me away dismissively. The feeling that no one saw me, that no one cared about my existence, began to settle deep in my heart. At the taxi stand, this sense of unease intensified. Drivers were looking at their smartphones, smoking, not moving an inch even as customers appeared. I approached one. "To the train station, please." Without looking up, the driver said, 500 yuan. Without the meter, "Traffic is bad at this hour. This is the price," he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I was too exhausted to argue and reluctantly got in. In the car, the driver chatted loudly with a friend on his hands-free device, his laughter echoing in the car as I stared silently out the window. Before returning, all I wanted was to be liberated from a tiring daily life, from a society full of indirectness, from the judgment of others, from days where I had to watch every word. But the freedom now before me felt suffocating in a different way. No one corrected me. No one expected anything from me, and amid this indifference, I began to feel an unforeseen loneliness. 5. When the taxi stopped in front of my house, I looked at the familiar entrance through the window. The scenery that should have been the same as 5 years ago felt strangely alien. When I opened the door, my mother greeted me immediately. "You're back." Her smiling face was as gentle as ever, though she looked a bit thinner. I'm back, I replied, unable to suppress a pang in my heart. In the living room, my father was reading the newspaper. He saw me, but showed no particular expression. Was his only acknowledgement. The father I remembered would have gotten up to help with my luggage, even without a word. Now, there was only the quiet rustle of him turning a page. My younger brother was engrossed in his smartphone, glancing at me for a second before his eyes returned to the screen. Even when I said, "Long time no see," I wasn't sure if he even nodded in response. Their reactions left me speechless. "Hey, where's my sister?" I asked. My mother's face clouded over for a moment. She avoided my gaze and said, "There was some trouble. She's not at home right now." She said nothing more and hurried into the kitchen. The heavy silence made it clear something serious had happened. But I didn't have the courage to ask more. At dinner, my mother's home cooking filled the table. I thought the familiar taste would soothe my soul. But there was little conversation. My father ate with his head down. My brother finished his meal and immediately retreated to his room. I tried to share stories about my life in the US, but I only received short replies like "oh" or "I see." No one tried to continue the conversation. I felt that our family used to be filled with more laughter, complaints about work, stories from school, talk about television shows. Those ordinary conversations created a warm atmosphere. But now, even in the same room, everyone seemed locked inside their own world. Only 5 years had passed. How did we become so distant? The next morning, I woke up early and walked around the still quiet house with an indescribable feeling of unease. A thin layer of dust coated the living room floor. The wallpaper was peeling in the corners. This was the house my mother used to clean meticulously every day, and that my father always maintained. Now, there was little trace of that care. In the kitchen, my mother was quietly preparing breakfast. Watching her back, I felt a wordless anxiety. The mother who was once so vibrant now seemed slightly stooped, her gaze fixed on her own hands. The breakfast she served tasted the same. But the family gathered around the table felt like different people. My father turned the television on a little too loud, and when I spoke to him, he often had to ask me to repeat myself. "His hearing isn't so good these days," my mother said with a sad smile. My brother never put down his smartphone, his eyes constantly looking down. We couldn't joke around comfortably like we used to. I thought about what my mother had said about my sister and decided to gather my courage. "Is my sister okay?" My mother paused, sighed softly, and began to speak slowly. "Not long after you went to America, she found a job and moved to the city. But she started contacting us less and less. Now, we don't know what she's doing." Her voice trembled slightly, and I instantly knew how long this had tormented her. A sharp pain went through my heart. While I was complaining about my life in America, I never noticed the changes in my own family. My mother said no more, stood up, and said she needed to hang the laundry, leaving me to stare at her retreating back. To escape the gloomy atmosphere, I decided to take a walk through town. My hometown, a place I hadn't returned to in so long. The scenery that should have been familiar now felt strangely foreign. How did it get so run down? I stood still, speechless at the transformation. Then, a face popped into my mind. Lishan, my cheerful best friend since elementary school. I remembered her house was just behind the shopping district and headed there. When I rang the bell, her mother opened the door. "Oh, it's been a long time," she said with a welcoming smile. But when I asked about Lishan, her expression changed. "My daughter moved to the city years ago. She got a job and never came back." Her voice was calm but tinged with loneliness. It turned out she wasn't the only one. Many of my classmates had left for college or work, and now none of them had returned. 6. There are no jobs, so the young people have to leave. 7. I looked around. Most of the people on the street were elderly. The vibrant town I remembered was now quiet, as if time had stopped. The government promised to help, but in the end, nothing changed, she said. Her words echoed in my mind. I realized that for 5 years in America, I had been consumed by my own small struggles, while my family and my town had changed so much. It felt as if the place I once knew had been replaced by an unfamiliar landscape. A few days later, I went to the local government office to register my address. The waiting area was already crowded with people, mostly elderly. When my number was finally called, I went to the counter. "Do you have your documents?" the official asked in a flat tone, her eyes fixed on her computer screen. I handed them over, but they were immediately pushed back. "You're missing this form." "I can't process this." I thought I had brought everything, but I was indeed missing that one paper. "So I can't file today?" I asked. The official finally looked up. "You can submit it, but if the documents aren't complete by closing time, you'll have to come back another day. You can do this online next time, you know." I could only nod at her impersonal response. I remembered struggling with bureaucracy in the US as well, the number of documents, the confusing explanations, the long waits, but every time the staff would explain things politely or kindly guide me through the steps. This interaction felt different. The words were correct, but they were devoid of any feeling. It was a mechanical, robotic service. Her eyes were empty of any attempt to understand my situation. I saw a man standing behind the counter, looking lost, but no one approached him. As I was about to ask if he needed help, an official pointed from a distance and shouted, "Over there, get in that line." I was startled by her tone, realizing I had been treated the same way. The belief that returning to my free homeland would liberate my spirit began to crumble. Here, freedom meant no one would bother you, but in return, no one would help you either. 9. I was just beginning to understand the wall of indifference that stood behind it. What is freedom? I asked myself as I walked aimlessly. In America, I felt constrained by the culture of politeness, the unspoken social rules. 10, 11, I had to constantly be mindful of my words and actions. I believed that returning to China would allow me to be myself again, an environment where I could say what I wanted and live as I pleased. But this freedom felt empty. No one corrected me and no one cared. But behind that was the reality that no one was there to help. In the US, the constant need for politeness was sometimes annoying, but within it was a culture of consideration for others. 4. People giving up their seats for the elderly on the subway, a stranger calling out to help you avoid a car in a narrow alley, the official at the DMV saying, "I'm sorry if this is confusing," during a long explanation. These weren't obligations, they were common courtesies. Now I understood. In this freedom of non-interference, my words and thoughts couldn't reach anyone. In the quiet solitude, I started to miss the very constraints I had felt in America. Perhaps what I had perceived as stifling was proof of being connected to others. That evening, as I watched my mother prepare dinner, I made a decision. "Mom," I said as she set the plates on the table, "I think I'm going to go back to America." The air stood still. My mother stopped and looked at me for a long moment. Then she spoke in a gentle voice, "If that's what you feel, then that must be the answer." I was surprised and, at the same time, relieved. I held back tears. She took my hand. "I was always worried about you, trying so hard over there." But I didn't say anything because I knew you must have been feeling things far more deeply than we could understand. Her words melted the blockage in my heart. I thought I wanted freedom, but the place I had envisioned returning to no longer existed. It wasn't my family's fault or the town's. Time had simply passed, and I had grown and started searching for something else. "The next time you go," my mother said, "go for yourself. Go with your own feelings, not for anyone's expectations." Her words lit a quiet fire inside me. I wanted to face that country again. But this time, I wanted to find my own role within its society. Late that night, lying on my mattress, I closed my eyes. Memories from my ordinary days in America surfaced, people queuing patiently for the train, the constant sorry and thank you in daily life, the friendly smiles, the shared public spaces. 4. At the time, I thought it was all just normal. Now I understood how meticulously each of those normals was constructed. In America, I complained that I couldn't be myself. Now I knew that being myself wasn't just about doing whatever I wanted. It was something forged through living with others. The changes in my hometown and family were real, a product of time. But because of them, I began to think that the discomfort I felt in America was actually a form of gentleness. The consideration, the politeness it created, social etiquette, mutual respect, and harmony. Now, those things felt important. If I went back, I wanted to find my place there. I wanted to be someone who not only received help, but could also support others. Of course, I was still anxious. The cultural differences, the language barrier, the workplace atmosphere, they would all test me again. But I wouldn't run away. I now knew that the unease and suffering I had felt had meaning. That experience made me who I am today. Freedom isn't about being untethered from everyone. It's the strength to choose to live alongside others. I believe that now, and I will move forward.